Jake Morrison pressed his palm against the cold reinforced glass, his breath fogging the surface as he stared at the creature on the other side. The observation deck of the Galactic Conservation Station hummed with the quiet machinery of 1,000 alien systems, but all Jake could focus on was the massive beast pacing inside Containment Unit 7. The Thornmane. That's what the other keepers called it, though Jake suspected that wasn't its real name. Nobody seemed to know much about the species anymore. This might be the last one in the entire galaxy, and it was dying slowly in this cage. The creature was enormous. 6 meters tall at the shoulder, built like a tank covered in fur and muscle. Its body moved with a predator's grace, but Jake's trained eye caught something else. The way it favored its left side. The stiffness in its rear leg. The occasional flinch when it moved too quickly. This wasn't just rage. This was pain. You understand what you're looking at, human? The voice came from behind him, sharp and clicking. Director Trell, the station's insectoid administrator, moved closer on her 6 legs. Her mandibles clicked nervously as she spoke. 3 keepers refused this assignment. Professional handlers with decades of experience. The creature has been fed remotely for 6 months because it attacks anything that enters its space. Jake didn't turn away from the glass. He watched the Thornmane's mane, what should have been a flowing cascade of silver and black fur, hanging in matted clumps. Debris was tangled throughout. Bits of metal. Old food. Things Jake didn't want to identify. Worse, he could see the angry red skin beneath where infections had taken hold. It's suffering, Jake said, his voice barely above a whisper. It's a killer, Trell corrected sharply. The previous facility classified it as beyond rehabilitation. We've been considering humane termination. The word hit Jake like a punch. Termination. They were going to kill it. This magnificent creature, possibly the last of its entire species, and they were ready to give up. Give me 2 weeks, Jake said, finally turning to face the director. Trell's antennae twitched violently. Among her species, Jake had learned, this meant extreme disbelief or concern. Human, your species joined the galactic community only 30 cycles ago. You've been at this station for 3 weeks. You have no credentials with xenofauna of this classification level. I worked with big cats on Earth for 8 years, Jake replied. Lions, tigers, bears. Animals that could kill me just as easily as that creature could. This is not a lion from your primitive world. No, Jake agreed, looking back at the Thornmane. But pain is universal. So is neglect. So is fear. And that creature is feeling all 3. Trell made a sound like stones grinding together. Disapproval maybe. Or frustration. But Jake could hear something else underneath it. Desperation. The station couldn't afford to lose this creature. It represented too much, scientifically, culturally, maybe even politically. But they also couldn't risk more staff injuries. You may observe, Trell finally said. You may study its patterns. You may prepare reports. But you will not enter that containment unit. Do you understand? I understand, Jake lied. For 5 days Jake did nothing but watch. He arrived before the station's artificial dawn and stayed until the lights dimmed for night cycle. He brought his meals to the observation deck and ate them while taking notes. He recorded every movement, every sound, every pattern of behavior. The other keepers thought he was wasting his time. Jake overheard their conversations in the break room. The human thinks he's special. The human doesn't understand what he's dealing with. The human is going to get himself killed. Maybe they were right. But Jake saw things they didn't. He noticed that the Thornmane's aggression spiked whenever groups gathered near the glass, when the observation deck filled with chattering aliens pointing and staring. The creature would throw itself against the barriers, roaring until its voice went hoarse. But in the early morning, when the station was quiet and Jake was alone at the glass, the Thornmane was different. Calmer. It would lie down in the corner, and sometimes Jake swore those 6 alien eyes watched him with something other than rage. Curiosity maybe. Or loneliness. On the 6th day Jake made his decision. He gathered his supplies, grooming tools he'd modified in the workshop, medical gel from the veterinary stores, and a bag of fresh meat he'd requisitioned. Then he walked to Containment Unit 7 and entered the access code. The alarm was immediate and deafening. Red lights flashed throughout the corridor. Trell's voice exploded through the intercom system. Morrison. Stand down immediately. I'm going in, Jake said calmly, stepping into the airlock. I'm not armed. Just going to sit near the entrance. That's all. You will be killed. I cannot authorize this. Then don't authorize it, Jake replied. He looked directly at the camera. Tell everyone a foolish human tried something stupid and didn't listen. Put it in my file. He sealed the inner door before she could override the system. The airlock cycled. Jake's heart hammered in his chest, adrenaline flooding his system. Every survival instinct screamed at him to turn back. His hands trembled as he gripped his supply bag. The inner door opened. The Thornmane's head snapped toward him with frightening speed. 6 meters of pure predator, muscles like steel cables under that matted fur. 6 eyes, arranged in 2 rows across a massive skull, locked onto Jake with laser focus. Its mouth opened, revealing teeth designed to tear through armor plating and bone. Jake forced himself to step inside. 3 meters from the door. That was far enough. He sat down cross-legged on the cold metal floor and slowly set his bag beside him. Then he did the hardest thing he'd ever done in his life. He waited. The Thornmane snarled, a sound so deep and powerful that Jake felt it vibrate through his chest cavity. The creature took one massive step forward. The floor shook. Jake's every instinct screamed run, but he stayed perfectly still. He kept his eyes lowered, non-threatening. He controlled his breathing like he'd learned years ago, working with tigers that could kill with a single swipe. Another step. The creature was close now. Jake could smell it, the infected wounds, the fear hormones, the sharp musk of a predator. He could feel the heat radiating from its massive body. The Thornmane circled him. Each footfall shook the ground. It came within 2 meters, then 1. Close enough that Jake could see the individual scars crossing its body. Close enough that he could count the parasites living in its matted fur. Then it stopped. And watched. Outside, Jake knew every keeper in the facility was crowded against the observation windows. He could imagine their shocked faces, their disbelief. The human was supposed to be dead already. But Jake understood something they didn't. This creature wasn't a mindless killer. It was scared. It was hurt. It was alone. And somewhere beneath all that rage was an intelligent being that just wanted the pain to stop. So Jake sat there for 6 hours without moving. His legs went numb. His back ached. But he didn't break eye contact with the floor. He didn't make any sudden movements. He just existed in the space with the Thornmane, showing it that not everything that entered its world wanted to hurt it. When he finally stood and walked slowly back to the airlock, the Thornmane didn't attack. It watched him leave with those 6 alien eyes, its massive head tilted slightly to one side. Outside, Trell stood waiting, her whole body rigid with barely controlled emotion. "That was impossible," she whispered. "It should have killed you in the first 30 seconds. Jake smiled tiredly. "I'll be back tomorrow morning." "You cannot." "I'll be back tomorrow morning," Jake repeated firmly. "And the morning after that. And every morning until that creature trusts me enough to let me help it." He walked away before she could argue, his legs shaking with delayed fear and exhaustion. Behind him, through the glass, the Thornmane watched. By the 3rd day, when Jake entered the containment unit, the Thornmane no longer growled. It simply waited for him to sit down, then watched him with those intelligent eyes. And Jake knew he'd taken the first step toward doing the impossible. Diane Grant had been the station's head veterinary specialist for 5 years. She'd treated creatures from 70 different worlds, handled emergencies that would give most people nightmares, and prided herself on staying calm under pressure. But right now, staring at the hand-drawn diagrams spread across her desk, she felt her professional composure cracking. "You documented all of this through the observation glass?" she asked Jake, her voice tight with disbelief. Jake nodded, pointing to his sketches. Each drawing showed different angles of the Thornmane's body, with detailed notes written in the margins. "These wounds here are infected. You can see the inflammation even through the matted fur. And look at this section of the mane, there are fragments embedded throughout. Metal shavings from whatever cage it was kept in before. Broken glass. Pieces of synthetic material. Every time the creature moves, those fragments pull at the infected tissue underneath." Diane leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. She was human too, one of only 4 humans working at the station. She'd been here long enough to understand how the other species thought, how they approached problems. "Jake, we already know the creature is suffering. The medical scans confirmed infections months ago. But we can't treat it. Sedation at the dosage required for a creature that size could cause cardiac arrest. The risk is too high. So the alternative is what?" Jake's voice was calm but firm. "Let it suffer until the infection spread? Until the pain becomes so unbearable that it stops eating completely? Or do we just skip to the end and terminate it like the other staff suggested?" "That's not what I want." "Then help me save it." Diane met his eyes and saw something that made her uncomfortable. Determination. The kind of stubborn, reckless determination that got people killed. "Jake, I admire what you've been doing. I really do. You've managed to enter that containment unit and survive for 7 days straight. Nobody thought that was possible. But sitting near the creature isn't treatment. You can't actually help it without medical intervention. I can groom it. The words hung in the air between them. Diane stared at him, certain she'd misheard. What? I can groom it, Jake repeated, pulling a bundle of tools from his bag. He'd modified standard grooming equipment, adding longer handles and softer bristles. I've been conditioning it to my presence. Building trust. Today I'm going to touch it. That's suicide. Diane stood up so quickly her chair rolled backward. Jake, this isn't one of your Earth cats. This is an apex predator from a world we barely understand. Its instinct will be to attack anything that touches it. Its instinct is survival, Jake countered. Right now it's in constant pain. If I can show it that I'm trying to help, that I can make the pain less, it'll let me work. You don't know that. I know animals, Jake said simply. He was already heading for the door. I know pain. And I know that creature is desperate enough to take a chance on the weird human who keeps sitting in its cage without hurting it. Jake, wait. But he was gone, moving quickly down the corridor toward Containment Unit 7. Diane grabbed her emergency medical kit and ran after him. If this went wrong, if the Thornmane attacked, Jake would need immediate intervention. She reached the observation deck just as Jake entered the airlock, and she wasn't alone. Word had spread quickly through the station. A dozen keepers crowded the windows, watching with a mixture of curiosity and horror. Inside the containment unit, the Thornmane was waiting. Over the past week, the creature's behavior had changed noticeably. It no longer threw itself at the barriers when Jake entered. Instead, it would position itself near the center of the space and watch him with those 6 alien eyes. There was an intelligence there that made Diane's skin prickle. This wasn't just an animal. It was a sentient being trapped in suffering. Jake sat in his usual spot, 3 meters from the door. But today he didn't just sit still. He pulled out one of his grooming tools and began working it against his own palm, creating a soft, rhythmic sound. Scritch, scritch, scritch. The metal bristles moved in steady strokes. The Thornmane's ears, small and nearly hidden in the matted fur, rotated toward the sound. Its massive head tilted slightly, curious. Jake continued the motion for nearly an hour. Scritch, scritch, scritch. Building a pattern. Making the sound predictable and non-threatening. Diane watched the security timer tick by, her heart hammering. Around her, the other keepers whispered among themselves, but she blocked them out. Then Jake stood up. Slowly. So slowly it looked like a Tai Chi movement. The Thornmane tensed, its muscles coiling, but it didn't move away. It didn't growl. Just watched. Jake approached from the side, never facing the creature directly. His movements were smooth and deliberate, like water flowing. He kept the grooming tool visible, still making that soft scratching sound against his own hand. When he was close enough to smell the creature's breath, close enough that one swipe of those massive claws would end him, Jake did something that stopped Diane's heart. He reached out and placed his hand against the Thornmane's shoulder. The creature's entire body went rigid. Every muscle locked. Its eyes widened, and Diane saw its claws extend from their sheaths. She grabbed her communicator, ready to call for emergency extraction. But Jake didn't pull away. He kept his hand there, warm and steady against the matted fur. Then he began to move his fingers, applying gentle pressure. Massaging the shoulder muscle underneath. The Thornmane made a sound Diane had never heard before. Not a growl, not a roar. Something softer. Almost questioning. Its body trembled, caught between the instinct to attack and something else. Something it hadn't felt in months. Relief. I know, Jake murmured, his voice barely audible through the observation speakers. I know it hurts. I'm going to help you. I promise. His fingers worked slowly across the shoulder, finding the knots in the musculature, the places where old wounds had healed wrong. The Thornmane's trembling gradually decreased. His breathing slowed. And then, impossibly, it leaned slightly into Jake's touch. How is he doing that? Amy, one of the mammalian species keepers, whispered beside Diane. That thing tried to kill me through the bars last month when I got too close. Diane couldn't answer. She was watching something that shouldn't be possible according to every xenobiology textbook ever written. Apex predators from death worlds didn't form bonds with prey species. They didn't allow vulnerability. They especially didn't let soft, fragile creatures touch them in ways that exposed their weaknesses. Yet there stood Jake Morrison, both hands now buried in the Thornmane's matted mane, working carefully around infected areas. And the most dangerous creature on the station was leaning into his touch like a house cat seeking affection. Jake worked for 20 minutes before carefully stepping back. The Thornmane watched him leave, and Diane swore she saw something new in those alien eyes. Oh. 3 weeks had passed since Jake first touched the Thornmane, and the transformation was nothing short of miraculous. Every morning, as the station's artificial sun began its slow brightening cycle, Jake would make his way to Containment Unit 7. And every morning, the Thornmane would be waiting for him at the entrance, sitting on its haunches like some enormous, deadly version of a house cat. The first time it had done that, Jake had actually laughed out loud. The sound had echoed through the empty containment unit, and the Thornmane's ears had perked up, as if it was pleased to have amused him. Now it was their routine. The creature would sit, Jake would enter, and they'd spend the next several hours working together on the long, painful process of healing. The change in the Thornmane's appearance was remarkable. Jake had spent countless hours carefully cutting away the matted sections of mane, working with scissors and clippers he'd modified specifically for this purpose. Each knot had to be approached carefully, because beneath the tangled fur were wounds that had been festering for months. Some days, Jake would spend an entire session working on just one small area, removing debris piece by agonizing piece. He'd found things embedded in that mane that made his stomach turn. Metal shavings that had worked their way into the skin. Shards of broken glass. Fragments of synthetic materials from whatever hellish enclosure the creature had been kept in before. Each piece had caused infection, and each infection had caused pain. Jake treated every wound with antiseptic gel, applied bandages where necessary, and monitored the healing progress daily. Now, the Thornmane's mane flowed in waves of silver and black that caught the station's artificial light like liquid metal. The creature's body had filled out too. Jake had worked with Diane to adjust its diet, replacing the tasteless nutrient paste with actual food. Fresh meat, carefully balanced with vitamins and minerals the creature needed. The Thornmane had been suspicious at first, but hunger had won out. Now it actually seemed to enjoy mealtime. In the observation room, Tyler Brooks, the station's lead xenobiologist, was running his fourth analysis of the human Thornmane interaction. His species communicated partially through color changes in their skin, and right now he was flashing patterns that indicated deep confusion. "There's no telepathic bond," Tyler said, reviewing the scan data. "No pheromone synchronization. No chemical dependency markers. By every metric we have, this relationship shouldn't exist. There's no biological explanation for why that creature tolerates the human's presence, let alone seeks it out." Diane, who had become Jake's reluctant assistant over the past weeks, crossed her arms. "Maybe your metrics are wrong. These metrics have worked for 700 species across the known galaxy," Tyler protested. "We've documented predator-keeper relationships in every major classification. None of them work like this." "Yeah, but how many of those species were human?" Diane shot back. Tyler's skin flashed a pattern that meant he had no response. The silence that followed was uncomfortable, and Diane knew why. The truth was something many species on the station didn't want to acknowledge. Humans were new to galactic civilization, barely 3 decades since first contact. They were considered primitive by most standards, lacking the advanced technology or evolutionary advantages of other species. They had no natural armor, no telepathy, no ability to survive in hostile environments without equipment. Yet somehow, this soft, fragile species was accomplishing things that the more advanced species had declared impossible. It was unsettling. It challenged assumptions that had been held for thousands of years. The discomfort turned into something else when Rachel Davis arrived at the station. She was a human psychologist, contracted by the Galactic Council to study Jake's methods. She spent a full week observing his sessions with the Thornmane, taking notes and recording everything. On the 8th day, she called a meeting of the entire Keeper staff. The conference room was packed with representatives from a dozen different species, all wanting to understand what the human was doing. "What Jake is doing isn't domination," Rachel explained, displaying video footage of his sessions on the main screen. "Look at his body language. He never forces contact. He never asserts control. He's building trust through consistency and respect. The Thornmane has learned, through repeated positive interactions, that Jake will never hurt it. That Jake will only help. That's something the creature's previous captors apparently never established." One of the Zenthari keepers, a species known for their strength and military precision, spoke up. "But it's a predator. Predators respect only strength. You must show dominance or they will see you as prey." Rachel shook her head. "That's true for some predator species, but not all. Earth predators, especially social ones like wolves, lions, or orcas, understand pack hierarchy, social bonds, and cooperation. The Thornmane species may have similar evolutionary psychology. We don't know because no one's been able to study them properly. But Jake didn't try to dominate. He created safety first, then slowly expanded what the Thornmane would accept. This approach seems extremely risky, Director Trell observed, her mandibles clicking thoughtfully. It absolutely is, Rachel agreed. Which is why it takes a special kind of courage to even attempt it. Or maybe a special kind of crazy. Probably both. At that exact moment, that special kind of crazy was sitting inside the containment unit with his back resting against the Thornmane's massive flank. The creature had rolled onto its side, exposing its vulnerable underbelly, something no predator would ever do unless it felt completely safe. Jake was treating a stubborn wound near the creature's spine, carefully applying antiseptic gel to the healing tissue. "You're doing great," Jake murmured, his voice soft and reassuring. "This one's almost healed. Just a little longer." The Thornmane rumbled, a sound so deep that Jake felt it vibrate through his entire body. It wasn't a growl. It was something closer to a cat's purr but deeper and more resonant. A sound of contentment. Diane stood by the doorway, medical supplies ready in case of emergency, though she rarely needed them anymore. "Jake, there's news from the Kentari Conservation Authority. They've heard about your success here." "And?" Jake didn't look up from his work, his fingers carefully spreading the gel over the wound. "They want you to consult on another case. Another apex predator. It's killed 2 handlers already." Jake's hands paused in their work. "Tell them I'm busy. They're offering to triple your salary." "Still busy." Diane hesitated. "Jake, they're threatening to destroy the creature if someone can't work with it within the month." Jake's hands stilled completely. The Thornmane's 6 eyes opened, immediately sensing the tension in his body. The creature's head lifted slightly, concerned. "What species?" Jake asked quietly. "They're calling it a void serpent. Young adult. Highly aggressive. The previous handlers tried force-based methods." Jake closed his eyes, then sighed deeply. "Set up a consultation call. But I'm not leaving here until this one is fully healed." "Understood." As if understanding the conversation, the Thornmane's tail, thick as Jake's torso and powerful enough to break bones, wrapped loosely around him. Possessive. Protective. The message was clear. This human was claimed. Diane smiled softly. "I don't think your patient wants you to leave at all." Jake ran his hand along the now lustrous mane, watching the light play across the silver and black strands. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Feelings mutual." The consultation call went worse than Jake could have imagined. Administrator Kent materialized in holographic form above the station's conference table, his crystalline scales catching the light in a way that made him look even more intimidating. The Korthan species was known throughout the galaxy for 2 things: physical resilience that bordered on invulnerability, and advanced technology that made most other civilizations look primitive. These traits, apparently, bred the kind of confidence that bordered on arrogance. "So, the human who plays with monsters," Kent said, his voice filtered through a translator that somehow managed to make every word sound dismissive. "Your success with the Thornmane is interesting. Curious even. Some call it luck." Jake kept his expression neutral, though his jaw tightened. He'd dealt with arrogant administrators before, back on Earth and now out here among the stars. "Some call it patience," he replied evenly. "Patience." Kentha's hologram leaned back, and Jake swore he saw amusement in those alien eyes. "The Kentari Authority does not have time for patience, Mr. Morrison. The Void Serpent has proven hostile to all contact. We have employed experts from 7 different species, including Korthan handlers with centuries of experience. All have failed." "Then maybe you need a different approach," Jake suggested, keeping his voice calm despite the growing unease in his gut. "Or perhaps," Kent said, his hologram leaning forward now, "we need proof that human methods are legitimate. That they're replicable. That your success isn't merely a fluke, or worse, some kind of elaborate performance." Jake felt his hands curl into fists under the table. "What are you suggesting?" "A demonstration." Kentha's crystalline teeth glittered as he smiled. "My chief handler, Kyle Reed, is one of your own species. He's been with our facility for 2 years, trained extensively in proper Korthan handling techniques. He will enter the Void Serpent's habitat and apply these proven methods. If he succeeds, we'll know that human success is replicable through proper training rather than through some claimed instinctual ability." A cold knot formed in Jake's stomach. "That's a bad idea. Every creature is different. You can't just apply one method to." "Then you believe only you can do this?" Kent interrupted, his tone dripping with mock surprise. How remarkably convenient, Mr. Morrison. Perhaps your bond with the Thornmane was staged. Perhaps these rumors of human capability are exaggerated. Perhaps your species is no more capable than any other, merely more willing to take foolish risks for attention. It's not about that, Jake said, his voice rising despite his attempt to stay calm. It's about understanding each individual creature, building trust over time. The demonstration will occur in 3 days, Kent cut him off again. If Mr. Reed fails, we'll revisit the termination order for the Void Serpent. The creature has already cost us significant resources and injured multiple staff members. If he succeeds. The administrator's smile widened. Well, then we'll know that humans aren't special after all. Just another species that got lucky once. The hologram flickered and vanished, leaving Jake staring at empty air. Damn it. Jake slammed his hand on the conference table hard enough to make Diane jump. He's going to get Kyle killed. Diane moved closer, her face pale. Can you stop it? Can you contact Kyle directly, warn him? Not if he's already agreed to try. Jake stood up, pacing the small conference room like a caged animal. And if he's been trained in Corthan methods for 2 years, he probably thinks he can do it. He probably thinks he knows better than the guy who's only been doing this for a few months. What are Corthan methods? Diane asked. Jake stopped pacing, running both hands through his hair in frustration. Intimidation. Dominance. Pure strength. The Corthans are nearly indestructible, right? Their scales can withstand plasma fire. They're stronger than most species. So their approach to handling dangerous animals is to show overwhelming force. Make the creature understand that resistance is futile. Establish yourself as the unquestionable alpha. And that doesn't work? It works for some species, Jake admitted. Herd animals that naturally follow the strongest leader. Some pack predators that respect physical dominance. But Death World predators? He shook his head. They're different. They've evolved in environments where everything is trying to kill them. Where strength alone isn't enough to survive. The Thornmane, when I first saw it, what did you see? A dangerous creature, Diane said softly. I saw a traumatized victim, Jake corrected. Covered in scars, infected wounds, signs of neglect and abuse. That creature has been dominated before. It's been intimidated, probably beaten, definitely mistreated. More force isn't going to fix that. More dominance will just trigger its survival instincts. It'll fight back because that's the only option it knows. Diane was quiet for a moment. You think the Void Serpent is the same? I think it's killed 2 handlers for a reason, Jake said grimly. And I'm betting that reason is they tried to force it into submission instead of earning its trust. So what do we do? Diane asked. Can you go there? Talk to Kyle before he tries. Jake was already moving toward the door. I'm going to try. Director Trell. He called out into the corridor. The insectoid administrator appeared moments later, her antennae twitching with concern. Mr. Morrison, I heard the conversation. I need transport to the Kentari facility. Now. Today if possible. Trell's mandibles clicked rapidly. That facility is 3 days away by standard transport. Even priority routing would take 40 hours minimum. Then get me on the next ship, Jake said. I need to talk to Kyle before he does something that gets him killed. Or gets the Void Serpent killed. And the Thornmane? Trell asked. You've never missed a session. The creature expects you every morning. Jake paused, conflict clear on his face. He thought about the Thornmane waiting at the entrance of its enclosure tomorrow morning, confused when he didn't appear. The trust he'd built over weeks could be damaged by a sudden absence. But another creature's life was on the line. And another human was walking into a death trap. Diane can handle the morning session, Jake said finally. The Thornmane trusts her now. She can do the basic care routine. I'll be back as soon as I can. He didn't wait for approval, already heading toward his quarters to pack. Behind him Diane called out, Jake? What if Kyle won't listen? What if he tries anyway? Jake stopped in the corridor, his shoulders tense. Then I guess I go into that enclosure myself and show him how it's really done. Before the Void Serpent tears him apart. He disappeared around the corner, leaving Diane and Director Trell staring after him in worried silence. 6 months had passed since Jake first entered the Thornmane's enclosure, and the galaxy had changed in ways nobody could have predicted. The Galactic Conservation Station had become something of a pilgrimage site for xenofauna specialists from every corner of known space. Jake Morrison's methods, once dismissed as foolishly reckless and dangerously naive, were now being studied, analyzed, and implemented at every major wildlife facility across hundreds of worlds. The human approach to animal care had caused a revolution, Instead of relying on dominance, force, and advanced technology to control dangerous creatures, facilities were now emphasizing patience, trust building, and what the academics called emotional intelligence. It was a complete paradigm shift that made many established experts uncomfortable, but the results spoke for themselves. Jake split his time between two facilities now. 3 days a week at Kepler Station with the thorn mane, whose lustrous mane had become the station's pride and joy. Visitors would press against the observation glass, watching in awe as the massive predator would greet Jake like an old friend. The other 4 days, Jake worked at the Kentari facility with the Void Serpent, which he'd named Shadow despite the protests of the scientific staff who insisted proper designation protocols should be followed. His colleagues found the simple name amusing, but Jake didn't care. To him, these weren't specimens or case studies. They were individuals with personalities, fears, and needs. Both creatures thrived under his care, their health improving beyond what anyone had thought possible. And Jake had started sharing his knowledge, training a new generation of handlers and techniques that most of the galaxy had never considered. On this particular afternoon, Jake stood before a lecture hall filled with 20 new recruits, all human. The Galactic Council had specifically requested human handlers, recognizing that something about Earth's evolutionary history had given its people an unexpected advantage in this field. The key to everything, Jake explained, gesturing to video footage of his early sessions with the thorn mane, is understanding that fear breeds aggression. These creatures have been traumatized, ripped from their natural habitats, transported across the galaxy in cramped ships, confined in cages that feel like prisons. They're not monsters. They're terrified refugees from worlds that are dying or already dead. A young woman named Jessie raised her hand. She looked barely out of college, eager but nervous. But Mr. Morrison, how do you know when it's actually safe to approach? What if you misjudge? What if you're wrong about what the creature is feeling? Jake smiled grimly, rolling up his sleeve to show the scars on his forearm. Long, parallel lines where Shadow's blade-like claws had caught him during a panic episode 3 months ago. You're never completely safe, he said honestly. But you watch. You learn. You respect boundaries and read body language. The moment you think you've got it all figured out, the moment you get overconfident, that's when you get hurt. He'd learned that lesson painfully with Shadow. The Void Serpent was more emotionally volatile than the thorn mane, prone to sudden panic responses that could turn deadly in an instant. Jake had been struck twice, earning scars he'd carry for the rest of his life. But he'd persisted, never giving up, and slowly Shadow had learned that this particular human was safe. That Jake would never hurt it. The real test of everything Jake had learned came on an ordinary Tuesday morning. He was at Kepler Station, inside the Thornmane's enclosure, working through their usual grooming routine. The creature was relaxed, practically purring under Jake's attention. It was peaceful. Calm. Normal. Then the alarm started. Blaring klaxons erupted throughout the entire facility, so loud that even the Thornmane jumped in surprise. Director Trell's voice crackled over every speaker, tight with barely controlled panic. Emergency. Magnetic containment failure in Sector 7. Multiple enclosure breaches. All personnel evacuate to secured zones immediately. This is not a drill. Jake's blood turned to ice. Sector 7. That was the apex predator wing. 32 of the most dangerous creatures in the known galaxy, all housed in one section for specialized monitoring. And the enclosures had failed. The Thornmane sensed his sudden fear, rising to its feet with a worried rumble. Its 6 eyes fixed on Jake, concerned and confused by the alarm sounds. Jake quickly moved to the enclosure controls, sealing the Thornmane's habitat with emergency protocols. At least his friend was safe, locked securely inside. Then Jake did something that went against every survival instinct. He ran toward Sector 7 instead of away from it. Morrison. Diane's voice called after him from somewhere down the corridor. What are you doing? Those creatures are going to panic. Jake shouted back without slowing down. If they encounter each other in the corridors, if they start fighting. Let security handle it. That's what they're trained for. But Jake knew exactly what security protocols meant. Automated stun systems that fired indiscriminately. Containment drones with plasma nets. Force fields that would trap and terrify already frightened animals. All things that would push traumatized predators past their breaking point, potentially triggering a massacre that would end with dozens of creatures dead. He couldn't let that happen. He wouldn't. Jake rounded the final corner into Sector 7 and stopped dead, his heart hammering. The main corridor was pure chaos. Creatures from a dozen different worlds filled the space, each one massive, each one capable of killing with ease. They snarled, roared, displayed aggression with bared teeth and extended claws. 2 were already injured, bleeding from territorial confrontations. The air smelled of blood, fear pheromones and danger. Overhead, security drones hovered like mechanical vultures, their weapons armed and glowing, waiting for authorization to fire. Red targeting lasers danced across scales, fur and armor plating. Jake took a deep breath and stepped into the corridor. Into the chaos. Into the teeth and claws and terror. "Stand down," he shouted up at the drones, his voice somehow steady despite his racing heart. "You're making it worse." "Mr. Morrison, evacuate immediately," came the automated response from the security system. "Lethal force authorized in 30 seconds. Override code Morrison 7 Alpha." Jake barked. "Stand down now." The drones hesitated. Jake's recent promotion to Chief Behavioral Specialist apparently carried enough weight in the system. They withdrew to holding positions, weapons still charged but no longer targeting. Now Jake stood alone in a corridor with 32 terrified apex predators. Any one of them could tear him apart in seconds. Together they could reduce him to nothing in heartbeats. He slowly lowered himself to the ground and sat cross-legged in the middle of the corridor. Then he closed his eyes and began to hum.